Yeah, I mean, really, it started probably February of 17. Was flipping a house in town, was working an engineering job at the time, and I was having some trouble with some contractors, just like guys that would show up on time and, do quality work. And basically had some phone calls with people, was networking, and had a buddy tell me that Trevor, who I knew from high school, because Trevor and I went to high school together, that Trevor had started his own sole proprietor, kind of one man carpentry company. And so I gave him a call, met him over there. We hit things off. He kind of helped out with some other guys that I had coming in there, and eventually kind of took over a good portion of the scope of that project, kind of helped get me from, middle of the road, passing framing inspection, all the way through final closeout. Did a lot of detail work for me, some custom stuff. Built me a deck in January, February. I like to tell people that. I remember pulling up on site and he was rocking the bibs and just getting after it. But just did a bang up job for me. Did well on that project, and through that process, Trevor and I started having some conversations about potentially going into business together. I had pitched him the idea, just told him I wanted to get out of engineering. Was looking to, flip some more houses. He was excited about the opportunity of flipping houses. That's always excited him. And as we were as the house sold, and then we were on kind of a summer softball team is what was going on, and we would meet either late night before the softball game or after the softball game, depending on what time it was, and just talk about business strategy, kind of what we were going to do going into business together. And the first idea was, obviously continue to flip houses, but in order to do that, we needed some cash flow. To get the cash flow, we needed to do some retail projects. And so we started doing some retail projects. One of the first projects we did was a full siding replacement. And on that project, it was a hail claim, but the siding was like in pristine condition. Maybe one side got hit with hail, but the whole house was getting replaced, and we ended up posting like some of the siding on Facebook to see if we could sell it. And we had somebody who wanted it for a rental, and we told them, hey, there's hail damage, but this siding is still in great condition. Was less than 10 years old. And somebody came, and we were able to avoid a dumpster because we didn't have to throw all the material away. And this guy came and paid us for the siding. We ended up buying our first trailer after our first job. So we flipped the siding and ended up buying an enclosed trailer. And so that was kind of our start. And we never really got the cash flow. You always think it's going to be there, but it never is. But we never got really like the cash stored up to be able to go and buy a property to flip. That's kind of a whole different process. So retail took off. We grew from there. We ended up actually hiring Kent Stackhouse, who's our superintendent, pretty soon after that. So we started August of 17, had a few students. I actually started teaching simultaneously at UNI in construction management. So I left engineering, started Team Builders with Trev, and then started working at UNI, which gave me some flexibility of schedule. Also gave me summers off, which is kind of the traditional busy season for construction. And I would basically be doing estimates at night. Would put my daughter in a car seat and go do some consultations, and early mornings, late nights doing the estimating stuff, and then during the day being at UNI and fielding any calls or doing any sort of thing between classes. If I had obviously I'm teaching some classes, but outside of that, if I have time, I can do my own personal stuff, and a lot of the professors do that. So that's what I was doing, and leaving on lunch breaks to go check on job sites, go check on the crew. I had a couple students that were part-time with us. Well, I mean, they were listed as part-time, but they were pretty much full-time. They were workhorses. Trevor had Tate Illig and Tanner Peard were kind of our two guys that we started with, and started getting into just different types of projects. Obviously, going into winter, that was our first winter. That was it was hard to keep busy during winter that first year, but we had some interior projects that carried us, and from there, things just kept growing. We hired Kent in April, I want to say, of 18, so that following spring. And Alex Cox, and both of those guys are still with us. I think we hired Alex in like May or June, right after that. And then we hired Bennett right after that in July. So, those three guys right there are really kind of staples that helped us grow and helped hold down the fort as we just figured our way through the business. And we kind of started as a do-it-all contractor. We started as wanting to do all the work ourselves and not sub it out, kind of trying to solidify a company that prided itself on doing everything in-house is kind of where we started, and we would do everything. Soon enough, we figured out that wasn't going to necessarily work long term, and in order to grow revenue, we needed to be able to have some subcontracted work. Obviously, we were subbing, the specialty trades with mechanical and electrical, plumbing. But we were at the start, we were doing all the roofing, all the siding. We were doing sub work for other bigger builders. We were doing all the drywall and paint ourselves, flooring ourselves, and it was just like we couldn't do enough work to support some of the ways that we wanted to grow. And so we started getting into the subcontracted work, and subcontract work over the next couple of years really grew into a large facet of our business. We got into roofing and siding pretty heavily, invested a lot of money into doing insurance or figuring out how to do insurance work. We got in with a vendor that was doing a lot of roofing and siding, and he was helping us through it, kind of figured out the CRM game. I remember the first time when Trevor and I sat down for business, when I was like, hey, we're like, where's your Excel spreadsheet with all your contacts and your notes and stuff? And Trev dropped on me a spiral notebook with just chicken scratch on it for his clients. And he had a few in the pipeline, but he's like, yo, this guy right here, he wants this done, by this time. I haven't called him yet, and it's been a couple weeks. And Trevor was he was on the grind like a lot of contractors are. Do it all type contractors where they got to do the bidding. They got to source all the material. They got to be the ones building it. They got to do accounts payable, receivable. They're writing checks to vendors and subs, and they're also trying to, grow their business simultaneously with building projects. And it's just a tough thing to do. And when I was younger, starting in construction, that's the kind of guy that I worked for. He was a do-it-all kind of guy, and in the morning I'd get to his house, and oftentimes he was down in the basement putting bids together, and first thing in the morning we would, go and drop off a bid at somebody's house. Just those guys that are doing everything. And so I had a soft spot in my heart when I saw Trevor, on that grind, and getting to know Trevor more too, and hearing about his story of where, he went to college in this area, and then, started with a large corporate type company and was working his way up that corporate ladder. And, by circumstance, things kind of didn't work out for him. And he, got the nut to go and do it himself. And so when I was working with him on that flip house, I was like, that's the kind of guy that I can go in business with, guy that's willing to risk it all and, go and figure it out on his own. That's kind of what I was looking to do. And our talents really mesh. We actually read a book, Rocket Fuel, which is about business partnerships. And just like when you go into business with somebody, it's a lot like marriage, right? You want it to be a long-term relationship. And so you really need to be on the same wavelength, have the same values, as well as be a complement to each other from like a strengths and weaknesses standpoint. And so what I was good at was kind of the business, and I'm not going to say I was good at it at the time. I was good at figuring stuff like that out. That was more my wavelength, was kind of the business side, the paperwork side, kind of figuring out the system, creating was my forte, and is still today. That's what I do a lot of in the business still today. But Trevor was really good at being what's called, so I was more of the visionary. Trevor was more of the integrator. If you read that book, that's the philosophy, and the integrator is really good at taking something that's built and running it really effectively. And so Trevor's very detailed. He's very meticulous. If you ever look at one of his estimates or one of his spreadsheets, I mean, it's down to the gnat's ass, and it is, down to how many nails you need, where my wavelength is more just kind of getting it started. And if it's operating good enough, then I try to, let it fly from there. So Trevor was really good at taking a lot of my ideas after I kind of got things started and just running with those. And Trevor was able to get off the tools pretty quickly after we started. I mean, when I say quickly, I'm talking like a year and a half. That's when we pulled Trevor kind of into the more of an office role. Kent was then taking over kind of more of the field role, and we had started to build a little bit of a company culture with field employees. And we've had a lot of field employees. It actually took us a while to really figure out what our core values were, as far as, Trevor and I knew we meshed, but we didn't really have like a documented, values list, if you will. And we started doing some stuff like that with the employees we had. And shortly after that, we started EOS, and that was around 2019. I think it was beginning of 2020 is when we started EOS. But prior to EOS, we were working with Profit for Contractors. So we had invested a lot into this roofing and siding, figuring that out, and then also invested into our business with just having a business coach related to growing profits in construction. And at the time, right, we didn't really have profits. We weren't sitting at the end of every year looking at, a big bankroll. It was ebbs and flows, sometimes, pretty low bank accounts, and it's like, who do we need to invoice, but long term, figuring out the coaching and kind of growing some systems, and then leaving PFC and going and building EOS, which is more of an internal type of a business structure to kind of have, hey, you have set meetings, you have an accountability chart, a scorecard for your business. The foundational tools of EOS is really what we needed to grow. And that was in 2020, and ever since starting EOS, it's been a wild ride, because every 90 days we have new goals. And it's funny how you go back and you look at where we started with EOS to where we are today, and every 90 days from when we started, it's just like we've been a different company. Even to this day, every 90 days, it's just a massive shift. And that's the cool part about being a small business. And I mean, we have roughly 20 employees today, so it's not necessarily small by standards anymore, but it's still small in a lot of ways. But you're able to shift on a dime. So if you change your focus, you're able to change quickly. You have more of that family culture, and we've really figured out kind of those values and what that culture is, and that's why we have what we have today, is because of the people and the values that those people have. And we all share those same values. We all vibe on that same wavelength. So it creates this really cool culture. And that really happened just, obviously, EOS helped that, but I mean, establishing those values, and that all kind of came together, and all the employees we have today, it's just amazing to look back at that and see this family that we have. And early on, when we were hiring employees, I mean, we were going through probably a guy every 2-3 months. It's surprising how Kent, Alex, and John Bennett, and then even a year later, John Bothwell too. It's cool to see those guys, how they stuck around, because they believed in what Trev and I were doing. They believed in the company, but there was a lot of guys in between those guys that came and left for various reasons, and it's because we didn't necessarily have values established. But once we established values, which was early in 2020, I think every employee we've had since then, or I would say 90% of the employees we've had since then, have stayed, And we've, from early 2020, I think we had like 8-9 employees at the time. And now we're sitting at 20, and even of those 20, the 10 that we've hired throughout that process, we haven't had to go and hire and fire throughout that. It's been a lot of guys coming in, right fit, vibe with the values, and enjoy what they do. They get it, want it, and have capacity to do it. And it's been cool seeing that come together. And so that's really what Team Builders is today. What started as Trevor Engels, Austin Maginnis, the acronym of what team was as two individuals, we've actually removed that acronym, and it's just team without the periods today, and that's because it stands. It's everyone's company. It's not just Trevor and I, and so we have this big vision too of having a business that is employee owned in a lot of ways, especially for those that have been here since the start. And so we still got a lot of work to do, but that's kind of the path that we're going. And from where we started as the everything contractor when we started and doing it all ourselves to figuring out the subcontractor work, today we're niching down even more. Today we're focused more on decks and fences, exterior projects, additions, those kinds of the larger projects we do are typically home extensions, additions, porch additions, overhang additions, garage additions, and our crew is focused mainly on the carpentry trades, so that obviously fits with decks and fences. And then obviously being in Iowa, having 4 months of very cold weather. The interior projects, we like to pride ourselves on being able to keep our guys busy throughout the winter and not having to lay off employees. So being able to do the amount of kitchens and interior projects, interior remodels, basements, and those kinds of things, and really saving that work for those 4 months instead of trying to do it all year round. That's kind of been a recent shift too, and it's just been a lot of try, fail, adjust. We tried to do kitchens all year round. That hasn't necessarily gone well. It kind of pulls us in two different directions when we're trying to do exterior projects at a high level, and then you get pulled into interiors, and it's just this kind of mind shift that kind of slows us down. And so saving that work for the winter has been a shift, and then the focus on doing decks and fences at a high level, with high speed, high precision, has been something that we've been able to do. And so just a reinvigoration of going after those types of projects is kind of who we are today. But it all started, 5 years ago with just me and Trevor looking to flip some houses.